Welcome to a bonus episode of the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and I'm joined today by Annette Orre, who is from the Oslo Literary Agency. Thanks for joining us. Joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So the most famous, the thing that I think you're most famous for among all 3% listeners and readers is for introducing everyone who went on the Norwegian fellowship last month, or 2 months ago now, I guess, to introducing us to a sauna. Do you want to tell us about the sauna?
I'm glad to hear that. We wanted to give you something to remember us by, I guess. And the Norwegian sauna culture. I mean, the Finns have done sauna for a lot longer than the Norwegians, but it's picking up in Oslo. And I myself went to a reading. One of my authors did a sauna reading approximately a year ago in a really, really hot sauna. With room for 100 to 120 people. And, you sit there for an hour, and it's somehow something to, the experience, I think. So we kind of wanted to share that with you, and I hope you liked it.
Oh, I loved it. It was fantastic. But it was fantastic, and it is also kind of like funny to retell the story to people where the night that everyone came in from all over the world for this literary fellowship, we were all had dinner, and then we were immediately told to get into our bathing suits to go sit in a sauna and watch and listen to a surprise, which turned out to be Jo Nesbø, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good sport. He agreed to do it, and we thought, what would be fun, more fun than to introduce you to one of the most prominent Norwegian authors, and he just agreed to do it. So it was a fun night. He was sweating. We were all sweating a lot.
We were all very sweaty. It was funny. One of my favorite parts of it was that how everyone initially had their robes on, because you're given the robes to wear inside there for I don't know, to make yourself feel more comfortable. And within 3 minutes, everyone's like, "Fuck that! We don't need robes at all. It's 1,000,000 degrees. Nobody cares." It was very good for creating a bonding situation.
Exactly. No, but I'm glad you mentioned, the swimsuits, because I'm sure that everybody sort of follow up question will be like, "Oh no, do they have to be naked?" And we kind of we had to reassure quite a few people that you're allowed to keep your swimsuit on. There will be bathing robes, so
Yeah, so it's all good.
We're slightly not as adventurous as the Finnish. So if you go to Finland, it's going to be the authentic experience.
Well, okay, that sounds interesting too, I suppose. I think you were telling me about how Jo Nesbø actually he accepts the weirdest invitations to give readings, right?
Yeah, he gets invited to everything, I think, because he is now one of the two most famous Norwegian authors in the world. So he doesn't really have to say yes to anything. But I think he likes to do new stuff. And I think he appreciated. He thought it was a fun setting, and he thought it was a fun group to talk to, and so he said yes.
Which is great. It's great. It was really interesting to hear him talk about his new book and all of that. So, how did you get into being a literary agent?
I came from literary criticism. I've never studied literature, which I'm getting comfortable saying now because I've been doing this for so many years. But I started doing criticism at a very young age, in the free magazines that were handed out at your high school, and then it just sort of just progressed from there. And also I wrote a lot of literary journalism, and then that was sort of my way into being an agent. I think I started doing that 3 years ago from now.
It's interesting because
I'm still quite new to this side. Yeah,
it's interesting because there aren't among Western European countries, there's a strong agenting position, or there's a lot of agents that are representing authors throughout Germany and various other countries. But then there's also a trend among a lot of Eastern European and France and other places where there aren't that many agencies and that many agents for the local writers. How does Norway fit into that scheme? Is it relatively new, or has it been an established practice?
Yeah. I think a lot happened with, as you know, Norway is going to be the guest of honor at this fall's Frankfurt Book Fair.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was made public 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
I know they have been working on it for quite a while longer. So I think with that being decided upon, the Norwegian agency industry grew quite substantially and was also more professionalized. There had been agents prior to that, but what we have seen was that big Norwegian names like Oliver Knausgård and Joe Nestor, once they reached a certain prominence and a certain size, they moved to foreign agencies like Swedish agencies, American agencies. So I think Norway, a lot of Norwegian publishing houses wanted to prevent that from happening, and also Frankfurt was a good excuse to sort of really try to build up the industry and expand. So that's how I came into the Oslo Literary Agency.
Oh, interesting. So, what are you guys looking forward to being the guest of honor at Frankfurt, or is it just a ton of work? Like, it seems like it would be very exciting and also like exhausting.
I think also it's going to be very quiet for a week that week in October because it seems everybody's going to be in Frankfurt. Now, of course, I'm looking forward to it a lot. It's still kind of hard to imagine what it's going to be because so many, I think, 12, 15 authors that I work with is going to be there, in addition to, I don't know, maybe 50 others. So it's going to be interesting to see the entire, or a very big part of the Norwegian literary scene in Frankfurt at the same time. But it's going to be fun, yeah.
Yeah, that's which authors are you most excited to present at Frankfurt?
I mean, that's that you cannot ask that question because if I start mentioning one, I should probably
okay
mention all of them. Yeah, I could say because some of the authors I work with have traveled a lot and has been out in the world for quite a while. But I'm really looking forward to seeing some authors travel and being introduced to Germany for the first time. And one of them is Ture Erik Lund, who is probably in Norway one of the biggest names in Norwegian contemporary literature. But he is not at all, a commercial writer. He's very complex. He's very literary. He's very adventurous, experimental, and he hasn't been translated before. So the fact that one of his major works is going to be translated into German and introduced in Frankfurt, I think is a big event.
That's one of the things that we've talked about a bit on. I've written about it before in various posts and like about Norway and specifically more recently this month. But that Frankfurt has like a huge effect in the sense that like a bunch of books get translated into German. They become available for a lot of people who might not read Norwegian to be able to read. That can read German, can be able to evaluate them, maybe sign them on. Have you guys already started seeing that impact of like the books that get translated into German then being able to find new publishers around the world, or is that still to come?
I would say we're definitely seeing parts of that because, as you say, Norwegian is a small language. What often happens, because, we as everybody else make sample translations of, 20, 30, 40 pages. So many books sort of are left in this, this is very promising, but we cannot really say until we read the entire book. And
right.
Once, a book is available in German, it's got a whole different chance of being read by a lot more people. So, yeah. And I think we're going to see more of that as well.
Is that usually the biggest stumbling block for you as an agent, is to get people to, or is the biggest stumbling block the fact that editors don't read Norwegian, or is there something else that you see as like a potential difficulty for getting people to publish Norwegian books in translation?
No, I would say that is probably the most important one. So being 3 years into doing this, I really see the value of making at least maybe translating half the book or as often as I can. Even though it's always a question of funding, of course. Translating entire books because then that's a whole different situation. And being Norwegian, we're lucky because we have quite solid support for translations. So especially now with Frankfurt coming along, so it's been a very sort of fortunate situation to work in for us agents.
Yeah, I only know, obviously only know like the English side of things or the American side of things, but it seems like there's more and
Mm.
more Norwegian translators that are coming up now than there were even like 15 years ago. When we first started like doing Jan Fosse's books at Delkey Archive when I was there, and then when I came here and we did Jan Sjarstad's books, there was only
Mm.
like, it felt like there were only like a handful of people who were doing Norwegian or translating from Norwegian. And now, like when I was there, there's that whole group of translators, both from, was it from China and
Yeah,
America? It,
yeah.
it was Chinese, right? Okay, so a bunch of Chinese, Norwegian Chinese translators, and then a bunch of translators into English who are both there on like a similar sort of
Mm.
fellowship at the same time, and it felt like there was like a whole new vibrant community. I don't, there's no question here. I guess like, do you see that as the case? Have you found yourself working more and more with translators to help with getting samples and doing the books and promoting them over the past few years, or is it seem, I don't know?
Yeah, no, 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 but you're right, and the translators are so important for the job we do because I mean
Yeah.
they're excellent readers and often they know, the publishing houses in their home countries quite well, so they can give a qualified reading. They really sort of add to the work we do, and we see with a few countries where there's a lack of Norwegian
Yeah.
translators, right? Talking about some like those that sometimes a publisher says I would love to buy this book but we have two or three Norwegian translators and they're booked until 2023 so we're just going to
Right.
put it on hold so it's extremely important that there are many and that they're good.
That's very true. I remember that it was Barbara Havland
Yeah,
was the one that was the big one back in the day when he first started doing books, and she was always booked till like for 4 or 5 years out. I mean, it comes up, I guess, with certain
yeah,
other languages, but like it is true that like unless there's like a ton of people, like it feels like there can be one or two translators who are doing everything, and there's no real time for them to work in samples or to help you out. So it's good that that Norway's cultivating this sort of younger generation of translators.
yeah. I mean, we had, as you mentioned, Barbara. She's definitely like one of the best. And with Knausgård sort of filling up Don Bartlett's schedule for many
Yep.
years, there has to be. We have to start using newer, younger names, and many of them turned out to be really excellent. So,
That's really cool. So, what are there any
hmm.
trends in Norwegian literature that you've seen either as a journalist or and critic or as a agent?
Yeah, that's that question. Um, I mean, yes and no,
Right.
because I think when something exciting and fun happens, it's never what you expected it to be. You can always, I mean, when I was a journalist, you said as long as there's three of something, you can call it a trend.
Yep.
A lot of young Norwegian authors are writing about, having children, being parents, not having children, not being able to have children. But it kind of feels a bit reductive to say that, that is Norwegian contemporary literature at the
Right.
moment because it's so much more. And I keep being surprised by the things that are published.
And
But you can come up with a lot of that, and of course you can always sort of trace the post Knausgård writing about your life trend. But I wouldn't call it dominating.
right,
In
right.
any sense.
Right. That makes sense. Are there any so without, I know that you don't want to talk about like the authors that you represent or give favoritism or anything, but are there books that you are very big on, either that you represent or don't, that you think are really interesting that American readers should pay attention to or should check out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is one book that I'm surprised hasn't been translated into English and
Really?
every other language in the world yet, and that is Johan Hafstad's Max Misha and the Test Offensive, which you probably know of
Yeah, the 1,000-page book.
already. But it's 1,000 pages long. I mean, that is probably part of the reason, but it's really a piece of world literature, and one of the books that is going to stay with me for the rest of my reading life. And I was really amazed by that book because I used to live in the U.S. for
Mhm.
many years, and I read a lot of American literature and I read a lot of New York novels. And had any of my authors said, I'm going to write a big novel about New York City, I would have been like, yeah, you
Yeah.
probably should pick something else. And so I mean, it's a book about a lot more, but it's also one of the big New York City novels that No, it's going to stay with me like one of the biggest New York City novels. And I didn't think that could be done by a Norwegian author who hasn't, as far as I know, lived in the U.S. or in New York.
It's interesting. He's very curious to me. Like, I know that he only has one book out in English. I think the Buzz Aldrin book. But I know he's written a ton of other things, and they all sound very ambitious and very different from one another. Very interesting. I have my interns reading that I think it's like 150 page sample that we got, which is like, well, this is just a portion. This is like 10% of the book. But like, if you guys want to check this out, let us know. But
and,
I'm
for,
curious.
For many books, I would say, it should have been shorter because I'm a big fan of good editing. But in this case, 1,000 pages is, it's exactly what it should be, I think.
Every single thing that you're saying is making, when they hear this, the other people in the office, Kaya and Anthony, are going to be like, God damn it. Because they always get upset that I always want to do these big, long, gigantic, epic books. And they're like, this is such a pain.
And I should add, I don't represent this author, so I'm not sort of sneaking in. I'm not trying to make a sale.
I know, but
this is just my honest opinion. Yeah.
But you're making a sale without having to make a sale. One thing that
exactly.
one thing that I'm curious about is the role of the agent in. You mentioned like the editing process and like the idea of if other authors, you'd be like, oh, you shouldn't write about New York, or like a book should be well edited, or what role do agents play in Norway in terms of like the editing process? Because I know in the U.S. they become more and more active.
Yeah, it's quite different in Norway from the U.S. and from any other place in the world, because I guess in the U.S. an author brings a manuscript to the agent first, and then they work on it and then bring it to an editor, whereas in Norway it's the other way around. So the editor is definitely the editor.
Okay.
But what we do as agents is that we often, start working with an editor and an author long before the book is published, and so I often read books and give advice, but I'm not an editor. I assist the author and the editor, I guess would say, and of course sometimes you hopefully contribute something that the author is gonna some advice that they're gonna use. But I think the American agent is more of an editor than the Norwegian one.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. One person that we talked about a lot when we were in Norway was Maya Lunde. Is that how you say her last name? Is it? Okay. In the history of bees.
Maya Lunde, yes.
Yes, I'm very fascinated by this book. I think I'm gonna get it this weekend and read it this weekend because I'm very excited about it. But do you want to talk a bit about her? Because I don't know, like, I know that she's like a big name, but I feel like this book sort of flew under the radar a bit over here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that was a very prominent book in both, Germany and in the UK, as in addition to Norway, of course, and many other countries. But and maybe I should add, Maya is one of the authors I work with, and I think she's an amazing name because she has a really big project. She's in the process of writing 4 books that she calls her climate quartet.
Yeah.
So this is the first out of 4 novels that can be read as standalones, but they focus on different climate issues, in addition to being, big epic narrative stories. I mean, I think what I love about her is that she's a fantastic storyteller, and she, especially writing about, close relations, parents, families, parents and children. She really, really does that well, but it's also, she has this grand backdrop. In the history of bees, it's 3 multiple storylines. One taking place in the UK in the 1880s, one actually is set in America, and one taking place in China in 21 something. So in the future, where the bees have been extinct.
I've been obsessed with the bee crisis for a long time, so it's totally hits a certain spot for me.
It's so fascinating, and scary.
It's terrifying.
And her second book was second book, The End of the Ocean, that's going to be out in the US and UK in a couple of months. It's about water and a big drought hitting Europe in 2040. spoke with the author, and she said, the only mistake she did was that she dated it too far into the future, because what she was writing about 3 years ago is actually happening now. And they're extremely fascinating and scary to read, of course, but also very, very good novels.
Yeah, we're starting to do some nonfiction books at Open Letter, starting next December, with a book about a Polish reportage about Foucault being in Warsaw, and like the climate of like Warsaw in the 50s, and like what the homosexual life was like to be in Warsaw in the 50s. But then after that, a bunch of books that we're doing are from Iceland that are all related to climate change too, because it is such a important thing. But it's and one of the people that we're working with, who you might know, Andre Snare Magnuson. We're doing 2 of his books, and he wrote this book that he's finishing now that we're going to do is called Time and Water. And he did a lot of research on climate change and on like water, exactly what you're talking about with this book. And he was very concerned about like going and speaking for people and like talking to people and writing about climate change when he's not a scientist, and like not knowing, how much he knows. And he talked to someone, and they're like, no. You need to write these stories, because no one listens to us. Like, no one listens to like our facts or like our data. We need someone who's a storyteller who can create a narrative, who can convince people that this is really, really important. So her books feel like very urgent, and should really, I'm sure they're going to do very, very well and all over, but it feels very important at this moment. But,
yeah, I think you're right, and her sort of mantra as an author is, write where it burns, because there has been perhaps a reluctance in Norway to write, something that could be perceived as, political literature or activist literature. But as she says, this is what I'm thinking about, day and night. She's a parent. She's got 3 children, and this is sort of on her mind. And of course, this is on everybody's minds at the moment. So of course, we want to read novels. Many novels, about these questions. In addition to, journalism and scientific, I think we need everything. I think we need inputs on this from every kind of genre at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Although I'll bet there's a lot of readers who like resist because they don't want that extra layer of anxiety. Like it's already like 1,000,000 degrees out every day of the year.
This is true. How are you guys doing over there?
Last weekend was brutal. It was very, very, very bad. Oh. It was like heat index of like 110. It's the hottest July ever. Like all the stuff that's not supposed to happen. One question I have about this next book of hers, though, The End of the Ocean. So this is with Harper Via, and Simon Schuster did the earlier book of hers, but Harper Via is one of the new presses that started up to do all literature and translation. Have you seen, even over the past 3 years, like a rise in interest among American publishers to do Norwegian books in translation, or just translations overall?
I would say yes. At least we get approached more. People are really want to consider more books. So yeah, yes, I think, and that might have to do with, translation support, but also I think that, a lot of Norwegian authors have done very well on the international fields in every genre, from, the literary novels to crime fiction to more popular fiction. So, yeah, I would say yes.
That's really encouraging. Like I was looking at, like I did a article about like the sort of trends on like how many books have come out from various Scandinavian countries and like where Norway is, and there is like a good trend line going upwards for Norway, which I think is really, really encouraging. Very cool. There's also not a question there at all either, but anyways.
But it's I think it's interesting to see, because Maya is one of the authors who aren't presented on the UK or on the American market as a translated work of fiction.
Right.
Sometimes some authors have a very sort of Norwegian focus, and that is sort of part of the selling package. Whereas this is just, and it is an international book. There's you can read the history of these and not figure out that the author is Norwegian. So it's a book for the international stage.
Yeah, that's true.
But,
I assume that plays into a bit of like how you guys decide how to categorize or how to push different things, like whether or not you're going to push it as like a Norwegian book or as a international book.
Yeah, that's true, and I think we definitely work with both, depending on the title. Very
cool. Well, I guess I have one last question. Is there anyone else that you want to recommend that it either has been translated, hasn't been translated. Any other authors that you think we should pay attention to?
Oh, there are so many, but if I have to pick one,
Yeah.
I would love to recommend Monica Isakstuen. She's also one of the authors I work with. She is one of the very few Norwegian authors being published and edited by Karl Ove Knausgård on his publishing house, Pelikan. She won the Norwegian Book Award in 2016 for a book called Be Kind to the Animals, and she had a new book out last fall called Rage, which in my view is even better. She's just completely original. She also writes about close relationships. Rage is about having children and how extremely angry you can get at small people in your life.
This is another. That's a really good selling point.
But it's also incredibly funny. Yeah.
What was her name again?
It's very, very funny and very, very smart. Sorry?
What was her name again? The author's name?
Monica. Her name is Monica Isakstuen.
Okay.
Isakstuen, yeah.
I have to look that up as a parent with with anger issues.
Oh, you should definitely. I mean, there is a hint of Jenny Afel in her style, without saying that she resembles anyone, because I don't think she does.
Yeah.
And she's a playwright, so she has it's dense, it's short, and it's just beautifully written.
Oh, amazing. Sounds fantastic. What is your, one thing, I've been doing all this stuff for Norway this month and talking to various people, but one person we've not talked about at all, although they keep being referenced, is Knausgård and My Struggle, which obviously is the book that, if anyone, aside from like the Scandinavian and Norwegian crime writers, if anyone in America has read a Norwegian book over the past few years and really thought about it being a Norwegian book, it's probably Knausgård. What's your take on him? Like, he's inspired so many different opinions here in the States of like people who really, really liked him when the first book started coming out, to then the kind of backlash of like, come on, man, we don't need to hear about the interior of your kitchen for like 400 pages, to like sort of coming back around to like, well, this is a really ambitious project. But the books haven't won, surprisingly, like they never won the big awards, which I always thought they would, like at some point along the way. And I'm just curious, like what you're, as a Norwegian, like, and as someone who's lived in America for a while, like what's your relationship to his writing into that whole project?
That's a big question. I mean, it was fun because I got to see the whole thing playing out up close in Norway. I mean, I was a big Knausgård fan before the My Struggle books was out. I read his first books when I was, in my late teens, I think, and I thought they were pretty amazing. So when these books were out, and nobody even in Norway thought they were going to be as big. I mean, it took a little time to emerge into the sensation it was in Norway as well. So first of all, it was amazing to see that happen. And I really, really, I mean, I remember giving birth to my first son when book 2 was out, and sort of trying to hold the baby and balance this 600 pages, and because I really needed to keep reading, and so I have very physical memories of reading My Struggle. I think it was book 2. And then, of course, I moved to the U.S. and I did quite some work for the embassy and the consulate, traveling around giving lectures on My Struggle books before it was a thing in the U.S. So I remember for a year or so I heard a lot about, well, we have autobiographies in the U.S. This is nothing special. That was, and then, it exploded. And it was fun to see that up close and see the reactions that were often quite similar. But I thought it was wonderful to sort of see the books being read in the U.S. because it wasn't all that much focus on, the autobiographical part. You see, who is he insulting? Right. Where does he sort of cross the line? It was more of a literary discussion in the U.S. And I think that, the books are worth talking about without sort of the layer of sensationalism that it sometimes and often has in Norway.
Right.
I mean, I'm a big fan of those books, and I think it's amazing that books like that can have such an enormous impact, because I don't think anyone saw it coming. I mean, some people might say that they did, but I don't think his publisher did, for sure, and I don't think anybody thought we're gonna make a lot of money on translating 3,000 pages of Norwegian autobiographical fiction. I haven't read them. I haven't read them over, so I haven't really thought of them that much since I finished book 6.
Okay.
But I consider myself a fan. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Like the book 6 just came out here. I don't even know. Was it last year? I guess. At this point, but it was
Yeah.
not. It's not that long ago. It was when we finally caught up, and after finishing that, I really enjoyed the whole process of reading those and listening to the audiobooks of them and everything.
Yeah.
I had the advantage of like the audiobooks plus the Kindle version because like those books are unwieldy, like to say the least. Like
Yep.
they're very hard to hold. Although I remember when my
It must be different. It must be different though. I'm sorry. I mean,
no, go on.
reading the 6th book in the U.S. because I mean I remember when we finally got book 6 in Norway and reading it and the last paragraph where he says I'm going to get up from my desk and not longer call myself an author. We kind of thought, okay, maybe he's going to disappear, maybe he's going to just walk into the woods never to be seen again. So it was a very sort of dramatic moment.
Yeah.
Just waiting for book 6 and reading book 6. Whereas now we know that he's still here and he's still writing he's still writing books. I guess there's a new novel coming out.
Yeah, and I haven't read the the seasons thing that he's doing yet at all. I haven't read any of those. But I really like the book about angels before. What was it called? Oh God, I'm blanking
A
out.
Time for Everything.
A Time for Everything. Yes. I think that's fantastic. Like I think that's actually an amazing novel. So,
That's a fantastic book. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's been overshadowed obviously by the gigantic looming figure of my struggle and all the baggage that comes along with that. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting to see him as like a literary figure whose reputation definitely precedes him and like is such a thing that it'll be hard for him, at least among American readers, to be anything other than that. Like it's kind of like one of those situations where like, what do you do now? Like you've written this 3,000 page epic like about yourself. Like what's next? And I think it'll be some time before like the assessment of his like literary value can really be really be thought about and written about and talked about in a way that's not just like a knee-jerk reaction to like this multi-year process of having these books because they came out here. I mean, they came out for ages in Norway because there's a huge gap between book 5 and book 6, right? In Norwegian, there's like a long time, and here they've come out fairly steadily.
They were meant to be written in and published within a year, but that didn't.
No.
I mean, he announced when he published the first book that it was going to be 6 books in a year, but of course that didn't happen. So.
Right, exactly. And then, but here, I mean, they came out pretty regularly, like a book a year, more or less, and book every 18 months, maybe. But that's like 8 years of like time that's sort of been going on and sitting there. So now, after that period of time, like to have anything else, I think it's gonna take decades before people can look back like with any sort of objectivity to like what his writing was and what that moment was and how that played out in literary culture. But it's very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're bound to get this sort of the ups and downs and sort of the people saying this is totally overrated, and then that sort of wave of it's bound to happen with books and phenomena as big as the Knausgård books. But I mean, I think the literature, as you say, I think it's also going to outlive it, and the books are so good that in 20 years from now, when nobody cares about the story around them, they're still going to be worth reading, I think.
Oh yeah,
but
exactly.
I went to this event at, I think it was at Symphony Space in New York, where they had this sort of panel, Ferrante versus Knausgård, and it was really, they were really tough, and it was hilarious. I think John Waters, director, was advocating strongly for Ferrante, and he wasn't so all that excited about Carlo Knausgård. And of course that's. It's doing the books justice. But I still think it's wonderful that literature can sort of bring out things like that and have, 400 people in the room cheering and shouting and being extremely enthusiastic for one or the other.
That is really funny. That's like very rare, and especially in American book culture, for people to be that adamant about like X versus Y. It's like the Yankees versus the Red Sox, but like with books. Yeah. It's absolutely wild. It's kind of silly, but
too often in Norway either.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Of course it's silly. But it's also wonderful, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. What is Norwegian literary culture like? Are there like a lot of readers, very passionate, very because you've lived in both places, so you can sort of compare America's like. Well, I mean, New York is special, but like America's general like not disinterest, but like a tacit acceptance of the existence of books and like a general like, oh well, Netflix is more our speed. We're very very much into Netflix. But what is it like in
Yeah,
Norway?
I mean, I think Norwegians read a lot. I haven't seen the most recent stats, but I think we're one of the most book reading people. But I mean, we have the same problems as everyone else. People
Yeah.
spend more time on Netflix than on their devices, and especially what they call the lost generation. The readers from 16 to 39 or 25. No, I think it's 25 to 39.
Oh,
Tend to drop out. Norwegian children read a lot, and Norwegians older than for 40 and older read a lot, but the group in between are sort of dropping out, and everybody's quite concerned about that. But I mean, Norwegian publishing houses sell a lot of books, and
yeah.
books get reviewed, authors make it to the front pages, so it's still quite a good and healthy atmosphere, I think.
I guess I do have one more thing that I wanted to. I want you to. I'm going to ask you a question, but basically, I just want you to tell everyone about this. Is that you mentioned to me that you guys have like a debutante? I want to say debutante ball, but that's totally not the right word. But like a special event in which for all the new literary debutantes get introduced by a famous author, reads their book and presents it.
Yeah.
And what? Yeah, could you describe that? That sounds absolutely wild and like an amazing experience.
It is. I mean, I don't know if it used to be one evening. Now it's actually 2 evenings in a row in December where every fiction debutante is invited to come read in the House of Literature. So I went last year on both nights, and I think it was like 45 authors reading. So it's quite exhausting, of course. I
Yeah.
mean, the air the air gets thick after a while. But it's also wonderful because big Norwegian authors like Vigdis Hjorth, Mona Høvring, so prominent Norwegian authors come in, and they really want to come in every year, and they sort of endorse 4 or 5 debutantes each, and so they give them perhaps the best reading, the best review they're going to get, because they really give a close reading of the book as an introduction to the debutante's reading from his or her work. So it's amazing. And I remember being asked, after a night, what can you say about, the trends and tendencies? Like, I can't say anything because I've been, so surprised so many times. And yeah, that's the only thing. There is no trend. There is no they're not doing the same thing at all. There are so many strange and crazy and unexpected voices. Thank God.
As it should be, yeah,
So that's
exactly.
a lot of fun, but it's also exhausting, but it's beautiful, and it's a wonderful way, I think, of welcoming new authors into the Norwegian literary scene.
Yeah, it really is. It feels very like collaborative and like helpful rather than like a
Yeah.
competitive situation where I think like certain times like literary things can fall into like a more competitive sensibility where there's only so many people who are going to buy books and whatever. Like there's a bit of rivalries that go on rather than, and this seems like something different than that, like welcoming people and helping expose young writers to new audiences, and it's really lovely.
It is, and of course, they're going to experience the same thing too, of course, because someone is going to get 5 reviews, some even more is going to get no reviews. So I mean, from there, things are going to take very different directions. But it's a really nice way to start and to put everyone on the same stage and give them a chance to meet the audience. So yeah, you should come and see it sometime. I mean, well, maybe not. It's,
I would love
learn
it.
Norwegian and then come listen to it.
Okay, it sounds like fun. I have one
I
last
don't
one.
think I would recommend it otherwise. Actually, you can do it.
I have one last question for you. Is what's your take on this whole six dice thing? Which I'm obsessed with because I think it's just kind of amazing.
Oh, well, what can you do? I mean, it's there, and I don't think we're going to get rid of it. It didn't used to be used for. I mean, I think every Norwegian are used to the dice. So
Yeah.
if you see the 6 dice on a bottle of wine or on ice cream or anything,
Oh, really?
You automatically. Yeah. I mean,
Oh, I
it's
thought it
used
was
for
only
everything. It's
books. I
useful.
didn't realize it was like all
Oh,
objects.
no. I think it started out. It started out in film criticism. sometime in the 50s or 60s, and then it just sort of grew. So it's used on furniture, it's used on clothes, anything, restaurants.
I love
And it was
this.
a little more controversial when they started doing it on books. I'm glad that we still have newspapers and
Yeah.
critics who don't use it, because obviously it's reductive.
Right.
But if a book you're working with get a string of six, three, a string of the six dices, of course you're going to put it on the cover and try to sell more books of it because of it. But I'm ambiguous.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's such a
Yeah.
weird scale. Like, it's just like, it doesn't, I guess if you grow up with it, it makes more sense. But like, from the outside perspective, it's like, that doesn't really track. Like 5, 10, like those are round numbers that we can understand. 6 is like a weird scale to be using, but I really love it. And I love that it's like a dice and it's like 3-dimensional.
Yeah, it's. I think for every Norwegian, it's completely intuitive. And I mean, my
Yeah.
sons would they would say this dinner was a 4 minus, or so they could sort of they could use it on really anything. I've tried to say that I don't appreciate my cooking being rated like that, but it's it can pop up anywhere.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's kind
So how
of
would you rate this conversation?
this conversation is six dice, 6 die, six. I
Oh,
don't. How do
thank
you
you
say
so
it?
much. That
Do you,
makes me very happy.
do you usually say it's like a 6, or do you say like it's a 6 dice? It's a 6 die. Like that's the part that I struggle
you would
with.
say it's a 6.
It's just a 6. Okay,
you would
so
say it's
just
a
a 6.
Yeah.
It's a
Or,
6.
Hopefully
6
not a
plus.
1. I mean, yeah.
Oh,
You would say
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's weird too, because like a 1 would be the best in certain instances, but you want to be a 6. Anyways, well, thank you very much for doing this. It was very fun talking to you. I really
This
appreciate
was
you
a lot
coming
of fun.
on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, of course.